So, welcome to our December meeting of the Regional Planning Commission. It is nice to see everybody here on a winter's evening. We will start, as we always do, with introductions. I'm Julie Potter. I'm from the town of East Montpelier. I'm chair of the commission.
Bonnie Waninger, staff.
Alan Quackenbush, Duxbury.
Don Wyatt, Waitsfield.
Michael Gray, Woodbury.
Kirby Keaton, Montpelier.
Jamie Stewart, Central Vermont Economic Development.
Dan Currier, staff.
Steve Lodge Speech, Town of Waterbury.
Bram Southern, Plainfield.
Garrett Torrey, Moortown.
Bill Aaron, Worcester.
Clare Rock, staff.
Bob Warnick, Berlin.
Byron Atwood, Berrytown.
Jerry D'Amico, Roxbury.
Peter Carby, Washington.
Lee Catania, Orange.
Jim Ashani, City of Berry.
Nancy Chartrand, staff.
Laura Lebeck, Brookfield.
So, Bonnie, do we have any adjustments to the agenda? She's got her mouth.
I'm sorry.
She's eating. She chose a bad time to start chewing.
I did, and I'm realizing.
So, while she is doing that, I will let you know that we have holiday goodies here, and clearly there's still a lot up here. So if, as the meeting is going on, if you want to quietly go up and get a few more snacks, that's fine with me. It's perfectly okay. And now Bonnie.
You may want to lean away from the microphone as you crunch things. That may come through. Yes, that's what I realized I just did. Two quick announcements. Project Review Committee needs to have a special meeting based on its last meeting to talk about a project. I'm going to pass around a sheet. Some of you have responded to the poll, some of you haven't. So if you're in the box at the bottom, if you could tell us your availability, that would be wonderful. And we can get that scheduled because we have speakers to schedule as well for the presentation. And then last month, for those of you who participated in the board meeting, Pam DeAndrea talked about web maps, and now you are trained in what a web map is and how to make your data more accessible. If you could fill out this nice little survey and return it to us about that, we would greatly appreciate being able to report that in our progress report, but we need the survey to be able to do that. And the last one, our regional planning commissions every year as part of our Agency of Commerce requirements do an annual report. And then we take those individual annual reports, which are about 13 pages each, and we're in a previous board packet, and we create an RPC collective annual report. Fresh, hot off the presses last Thursday. If you would like one, we'll just pass those around so you can have one. One side reports one thing from each municipality or each RPC as an example of our work. The inside is a map that shows the type of work in every community through symbology. If you look at it and would like to hand it back, you're more than welcome to, but you're welcome to take it home. Thank you.
Do we have any public comments? Hearing none, we will move on with our program. First up is Jamie Stewart. Jamie comes to us roughly quarterly to talk about goings on at Central Vermont Economic Development Corp. Jamie, we're glad to have you.
Thank you. Since we last met, we did hold an Opportunity Zone meeting. I'd say it was a combination of the city, Bay Area development, myself and a few others that organized it. We had a fairly good turnout. There were almost 30 people that participated in it. The one issue that we still have is that the federal government, in their infinite wisdom, has provided guidance on how investment in an opportunity zone works for the investor side. They have not done such a good job at providing the clarity on how it works for the businesses that are receiving the investment. If it's a real estate deal, it's a pretty clear-cut thing, but any other type of investment, we're not clear on yet. So we will continue to monitor the information as it's brought out and then get that information disseminated to the appropriate parties. I am actually having a meeting tomorrow with a real estate broker who is representing a business that is looking to establish a new enterprise within an opportunity zone in Vermont, and is coming to meet with myself and Joel Schwartz to look at potential options in the area for the one opportunity zone that we have in the region. continue to work with a number of businesses up in the Wilson Industrial Park with pieces. One of the issues that we are, again, Joel Schwartz and I are working on collaboratively is public transportation, particularly with some of the more entry-level positions. Some of the companies are having trouble with their workforce, having difficulty with access, getting to facilities up in Wilson Industrial Park. So we've started conversations both with Green Mountain Transit, but more importantly with the State of Vermont Department of Transportation folks about the possibility of establishing van pools, pool sharing, some of the alternatives, because it seems to take somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2 years to establish a bus line, even once you've established the demand for it. So we're going to look for what we can do in the interim steps to make sure that we're getting the people who are predominantly coming from Berry City, but from other parts around the region, to work in that area. Beyond that, I would just tell you that we are extremely busy, and it's a little bit out of cycle. Typically, I've been doing this for 23-odd years. Typically, this time of year, things start to quiet down going into the holidays. I am seeing the exact opposite happening. We are seeing an acceleration of businesses that are making decisions to expand operations, to increase employment, to invest more in equipment and facilities. So that is putting pressures, and I know I've talked to you guys about this in the past. Workforce, available workforce, skilled workforce continues to be the single biggest concern raised by the businesses that I'm meeting with. And so we are operating in a number of different programs trying to address that. Again, since the last time you saw me, we held our workforce summit where we brought together businesses as well as all of the providers. Typically in those meetings, you get a whole lot of providers and a couple of businesses. We decided we were going to flip that model. We had more businesses attending than providers, and we, as a result, I think got a lot further in creating partnerships, collaboratives for developing workforce training here. And then finally, we are doing a lot of work with the granite industry. I know it sounds like a lot of Barry right now, Janet, you're happy, I know, but it's we've been doing a lot with the granite industry and trying to reestablish an apprenticeship program, taking the 1946 policies and procedures, bringing them up to date. We have 2 companies at this point that we are supporting that have initiated the apprenticeship program, each with 2 to start, but it was more as a pilot to develop the criteria and the procedures and policies. And then we'll be looking to roll that out through the balance of the Barry Granite Association membership in the next couple of months, but it is moving forward. But we are seeing right across the entire region. You've got issues, I've heard concerns in Waterbury because Lawson's went out and hired, they've got almost 40 people that they've hired at this point. And they're offering very competitive wages and benefits, including those that work in their wait staff. Everybody receives a working wage. So the tips that are collected at Lawson's tasting room are all going to charity. But as a result, they've got people that will work in the restaurants and bars in Waterbury that said, I can get full-time work with full benefits by going down the street to Lawson's. And so there's been a drain of workforce. So we're having to backfill on the other side. And it's a good problem to have because we've got people moving into good jobs. But it still kind of exacerbates some of the other problems we have filling the other positions. So I think that's probably enough.
Anybody have any questions for Jamie?
I have a question. Who does the actual workforce training? Are there people, contractors that come in, or how do you handle that?
Real combination. I would say that the largest percentage of the workforce training that we're working with companies to fund right now is on-the-job training. And so it's internal training that they're delivering, the companies are delivering themselves. They have the capacity, they have the talent, the skill pool. They just need to get the people in there and get them trained. So we're able to help support those employees during that training period, financially support those employees during the training periods, and help the companies, in most cases, expand the level of training that they're able to offer their people by helping grow their budgets to a degree. But we also do work closely with CCV, Vermont Technical College in particular, on delivering services, Vermont Manufacturing Extension Center. There's a real network. That was one of the things that came out of the summit. We've had a problem that we've been talking about as long as I've been in this work, that we needed to generate more skilled people, and we needed a system in place. Well, the reality is that that system exists today. We have all the pieces we need to train everybody we need in most every skill that is needed. What we haven't done a good job is putting the companies together with those providers and creating the real collaboratives and partnerships between the businesses and the training providers to make that an efficient system. And that's, I think, really where we're trying to go now. Byron?
Jamie, what kind of skills, when you talk about developing skills, what kind of skills are you talking about? Because the skills in my business, probably about 5 years to train a machinist, about 3 years to train a fabricator. We train our own people.
Yep.
We have 45 employees. We really don't have a hard time getting employees. But when you talk about training people, are we talking about very specific type jobs?
A lot of times, yeah. Specific types of equipment. CNC is absolutely, CAD and CNC work has been a large portion of where we're seeing in the manufacturing side, because so many of the businesses
Yeah, that's pretty low skill. That's fairly low skill, fairly quick to train. You
Fairly
can
quick to
measure
train,
with a
yeah.
caliper, push on, feed the stock
Yeah.
in, measure a piece. Okay.
Yeah, we're seeing, it's mostly directly equipment process-related training, getting people up to skill and ability within specific processes.
But something you can actually, fairly low-skilled work. There might be somebody working in Lawson's, cleaning a vat out. Might be somebody making the socks, tending a machine.
Yep,
Okay.
yeah. So it can be as basic as that, and then obviously we have them one of the other skill sets that we're missing is leadership, management, especially in the mid-level. You and I and all of our compatriots are really looking at retirement in fairly near term.
You are?
Oh, yeah.
Not me.
But the reality is that, the baby boomers, we're aging out of the workforce, and we make up the vast majority of the management that exists today. And you're not going to just take somebody off the line and say, okay, now you're a manager, and expect them to be good at it.
Exactly.
So we've been working with a number of companies and developing leadership training so that they are identifying those people today that they want to be their company leaders going into the future, getting them those management skills at the same time that they are able to be mentored by the current management folks.
Yep, that's good.
So if we can get that institutional knowledge moved across, plus give them the skills to succeed, then we've got a much better chance that we can continue to improve. But I will tell you that one of the things I've stressed in conversations when I've been talking in schools or in colleges or just in general with workforce people, there's an opportunity right now for young people in the workforce that has not existed in a long time, because we have this huge vacuum pull from the top. So the opportunity for advancement in jobs is probably greater today than it's been at any time since the end of World War II. And so there's some real positives on the horizon for the workforce that's coming into the workforce today. If they show aptitude, if they show the skills, and most importantly, the attitude. And that's the thing that a lot of the businesses I've been dealing with have been finding people lacking some of the soft skills and some of the abilities, and that one's much harder to do a simple class to train people how to behave in public and to show up on time for a job. So, but we've got programs for that as well, so.
Leadership is a huge issue.
Huge. Yeah. And we're seeing that whether it's, National Life, Blue Cross and Blue Shield, or, the production facilities down at Darn Tough, all of them are looking at that leadership issue. And it's, when you look at your workforce, I think the Granite Association, their average age in their workforce is like 57 or 58 right now.
Wow.
So, there's a huge wave of turnover in the near future for a lot of people, and you're losing a lot of leadership in that process. So,
Byron, the municipalities are as well. The Vermont Council on Rural Development recently held kind of a leadership summit that any municipal official could sign up for. They had so much of sign-up and attendance that they were a little bit in awe at the level of people in all, both senior down to I'm new to the workforce, who wanted to learn how to be better leaders. They're considering holding another summit next year. We've suggested that they also consider supporting those folks who came to the first one and bringing them back together to have kind of a share. How have I taken my training? And now over the year or 6 months, used it. Because they go back to their municipalities and they're a little bit isolated from the full group. So I don't know if the
well, and
the
what we're finding
businesses
is
get internal
it's
support.
good too when you get that kind of a group together to do it, because then the group
They grow
itself
together.
helps kind of bring out the issues and bring up the issues better. When, you know, we've worked with several companies to get together to pull together the leadership training, and one of the things the woman who's delivering the training from VTC was explaining is that she really liked it when she had people from different companies, because it brought different perspectives, and that cross-pollination from different organizations really helped drive the whole story forward. So, but, you know, again, it's going to be creative, different ways. There's not one form that works for everybody. So that's the other thing that really came out of the summit, was trying to catalog all the different organizations and have resources out there so that you can find the one that's the right fit for your organization, and then where we can find the resources. But right now, there's a big push from the federal government to drive skills-based training, certification trainings, apprenticeships. So companies like yours, there will be support programs if you've got specific certification trainings that your people need to go through. There's going to be programs that will be able to specifically support those. And that's where, as those are getting defined, and it's the federal government, it's the state trying to decide what to do with the federal money, and you know, nobody just comes out with a straight answer, this is what we're going to do. So we're just kind of feeling it along as they figure out what they're doing. But a lot of these answers have to be decided because of timelines of the federal government over the next 2 months on how resources are going to get allocated. But we'll have a lot more to talk about on those specifics as soon as they tell me what they're doing with it, and I'll be happy to share that information. So,
Jamie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's always interesting to hear about how this is working in the private sector and how it ripples to the economy, but it certainly impacts everything that we care about as well.
Well, and I think, you know, the most important message is, folks, we're actually doing pretty well. And as a region of the state, we're actually doing better than many other parts of the state. So whatever we're doing, the special sauce seems to be working. And let's just hope it keeps going for a while.
It's always nice to get some good news. Jamie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excuse me. One of the things that we try and do when we have speakers for these meetings is from time to time showcase some of the really interesting projects that staff has been working on, and some of the difference that it's making in the region, and some of the benefits it's offered to some of our communities, and may offer to even more of our communities if they take the RPC up on it. Tonight we've got 2 presentations. The first one up is Clare. I think Clare has been managing our Brownfields program, and I'll let you just take it away.
Do you want me to drive for you?
I don't mind coming here.
Claire?
Yes. You'd be more flexible.
Down in front.
I need to be over here. Oh, we were on. Let's go get it.
Bonnie, do you want to check?
Okay, blight and might, revitalizing abandoned and underutilized properties and the value of the CVRPC Brownfields program. So I'm going to start by going back in time. We have a picture from 1909, and I'm wondering if anybody here can tell me where this picture was taken. But not Dan, because he already knows.
I was already quizzed.
Looks like
Anybody?
buried to me, looks like the historical,
No.
Robert Byrne.
The lane shops.
Taylor Street, Taylor Street.
Hey, there we go.
Where?
So now if we were to go forward in time, maybe
So
by
we did,
20...
we didn't hear that.
Oh, this is,
Taylor Street.
this is, say if you were standing on top of the shores or on top of our office building and looking towards Taylor Street. This is the railroad bridge that exists there. The shores would be over here. The covered bridge you see here is the Taylor Street Bridge. And the railroad yard there is where the new transportation center is going to be, or is in the process of construction. So if we were to flash ahead to say 2029, I think the city of Montpelier would hope that that same area would look like this. And so you see the new transit center built on what was formerly known as the car lot, and then the other infill development that's also being proposed to be built there. When we're thinking about brownfields, you may be thinking, well, maybe the problem of that car lot site was that old railroad yard. But if we look at another historic picture, actually, so this is the site, like what many of you may be familiar with it looking. It's kind of an underutilized site with kind of an insufficient bus station. And like I said, this is the site that once had many of those multiple railroad tracks on it that we saw from that historic picture. And like I said, we may be thinking, well, maybe it was that rail yard that, complicated some of the development at that site. But if we were to look at a picture from the 1970s, the site is circled up here, and now we have a different view to reorientate yourself. And so now the site that we were looking at is circled there. In the 1970s, that site actually was a salvage yard where they were taking apart old transformers that at the time were constructed or had PCBs inside of them. And PCBs is a carcinogenic. And so what was found at the site, basically one of the big problems at the site was this underground plume of PCBs. And so what you're seeing here is a map of that plume that was underneath the site. And so there is a fairly kind of obvious, well, that's a brownfield. You've got this situation, you've got this complication. And so what we hope to have on that site now, once that has all been remediated, is this nice new transit center. And this was actually a project that under a past Brownfields grant, the CVRPC did contribute some money to. We invested about $60,000 in that project as a cost share with the property owner. And so this is kind of one of the brownfield sites that many people are familiar with in our region. So now we're going to take a look at some of the properties that have more recently been enrolled in our program, and see how those sites are moving through the process.
Just a clarification, were the PCBs cleaned up at some point since the 70s?
Yeah, I believe that they were. There was some excavation that was going on there, and I think it was a combination of them also capping the site, which was also kind of creating a barrier between the human receptors.
It's been capped. That was the solution.
That was, I believe, that was part of it. Yeah.
They dug out some.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a site that was currently enrolled in our program, and this is a site that maybe some of you would think brownfield, maybe some of you not. This is in Woodbury. This is on Route 14 in the village of Woodbury. It's the country store, and the town is seeking to purchase this property. It was an old residence that was built in about the 1850s, and then it was converted into a country store, and like many country stores, it sold gasoline, and that was kind of part of maybe some of an indication that there may be some contamination at the site. You can see old gas tanks there, and there were underground storage tanks that had been removed from the property that sat on the end of the property that's kind of the other side of the site that doesn't have the building on. And so the current owners of the site had owned the building for a while, but kind of went the way of many country stores. And what had happened at this site was that there was actually a stream that kind of comes from the mountainside behind, cuts across the property, and then goes underneath the road. And that stream had been kind of channelized, and the building had been built on top of it. And so when there were heavy rain events, that stream kind of overtopped the banks, caused some flood damage, and that happened repeated times. And then when the store closed, just that problem became exacerbated, and it fell into disrepair, and the property owners are no longer interested in investing anything in this property. And the town of Woodbury actually put out to vote to see if the citizens would be interested in contributing some money towards purchasing the site, matching a FEMA grant where they could buy the site, take down the building, restore that stream, connect it back to its floodplain. And so that's the intent of the town, to do a floodplain restoration on this site. But one of the factors in that is that FEMA requires that the site be clean before they disperse the funds to the town to purchase it. And because this has a history of being a gas station, there's a sense of, maybe there's something in the ground. So with this site was enrolled in our Brownfields program. We hired the Johnson company to undertake some site assessments, and we've invested just over $46,000 in assessment work on the site, which is no small amount of money. That amount of money probably wouldn't have been contributed by the property owner given the state of the property and their interest in just wanting to sell it. And that is a chunk of change to a small municipality that's operating on limited funds. So that's part of what our program does, is be able to kind of contribute these funds to help projects like this move forward.
We would have been stopped in our tracks if CVRPC hadn't done the Brownfield study for us. They would have just stopped the whole project.
Clare, does CVRPC, do you get money from the federal government for these brownfield restoration projects?
We do. So the Regional Planning Commission has applied to the EPA and has been successful in receiving grant funds from the EPA in the past. Currently, we've expended all our funds under our most recent grant, but we are going to be applying for more, so we anticipate having some additional funds, hopefully come springtime.
Good.
And so the other benefits that come from doing projects like this is that this work that's being done, and the pictures you see here are of a contractor actually going in and removing about 65 cubic yards of the contaminated soil. What we had paid for with our program was not only a phase 2 environmental site assessment that delineated the extent of the contamination, but the Johnson Company also put together a soil removal management plan, which basically specified what needed to be removed, where that soil could go to, because some of this soil cannot just go to a landfill or be used as fill on a construction site. Some of it does have to be managed at certified facilities. And so, the work of doing that assessment work and actually removing that soil it creates jobs, it puts people to work. So that's one of the benefits of our program. An additional benefit of this particular site is that with once the project is actually completed, it may well increase some community pride. Right now that building is a dilapidated, vacant building that sits in the heart of their village, creating an eyesore. And so once this is redeveloped, it'll be a more attractive property, and it'll create some green space right in the heart of their village. And in addition, one of the driving forces here is that one of the other benefits would that it would decrease some of the property damages that had been incurred when that stream was channelized and underneath the building. So those are some of the benefits that we anticipate seeing coming from the investment with this Brownfields project.
Is there any thought to enlarging the culvert underneath the highway?
That is the responsibility of V-Trans, and right now that is not on their priority list, and because of the town wanting to move forward with the project and FEMA wanting to disperse the funds, and already FEMA has held on to the funds for a while all of this was going on. That has been recognized as something that will have to happen in the future, but the town didn't want to wait until they did that before they could move forward with their project.
And V-Trans has always promised that once we took care of our part of the stream and the flooding, that they would take care of theirs, so hopefully they'll follow through.
It's a perfectly, my understanding is it's a perfectly serviceable culvert, except for the debris. It's a double box culvert,
Right.
except for the debris that jams.
There's an
But
area
most of
right
that
in
debris
the-
jams at the country store now. And so once that's removed, more of it will come to the culvert, and there might be more of an incentive to address it.
Claire, I'm curious about this. Now, was there contamination found from those gas tanks, the old gas tanks?
Yes.
They had to be,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I'm very curious, because it looks like that a lot of benefits have accrued to the, does the landowner still own this land after all this work is done that they didn't pay for?
So this work happened just in November,
Yeah.
and so what the town is waiting for is for the Department of Environmental Conservation to basically review like the closeout report from this removal. Then the DEC can sign off on the site being clean. The town can then submit that letter to FEMA, then FEMA will disperse the funds in order for the town to then start accruing the costs associated with paying for the property, taking down the
But
building, and
I
so
think
forth.
to Byron's question, is there a contractual arrangement already between the town and the property owners? Or is the town hoping the property owners will continue to?
They are, I know you had a purchase and sale
Oh, you
agreement
did?
in
Yes.
place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, there's still a lot of costs involved in dealing with that property that the property owners definitely aren't able to deal with, so it's really not to their benefit to say, oh, okay, thanks for fixing it up, and there's before, you know, once the FEMA money is given to the town, then we can purchase the property, and then we'll deal with the actual buildings. There's asbestos removal, et cetera, still to come, so there's still significant costs that hopefully the FEMA grant will cover most of.
That's ridiculous.
Michael, can you talk a little bit about where the floodwaters go right now with the?
Well, in the photo that you can see on the left, the floodwaters basically rise up and kind of flow right through the store, or there's a kind of a drain right tight to Route 14 that'll just come up through that. And then it spreads out. That whole area, the village area there, is kind of a basin. There's a brook running behind those buildings that you see on the other side of Route 14. So that whole area, especially to the right, the red building is our post office, and the building on the right is a fire station. That area is kind of where the pool, the mini pond sort of forms, and then it runs into the Kingsbury branch behind those buildings. So the fire station is periodically flooded. The post office seems to have survived most of that, and then there's a neighbor on the other side of the store, on the photo on the right, a house that their basement has been flooded a number of times.
So in each of these, you weigh the public and private benefit, because clearly there's a private benefit that the existing owners accrue. At the same time, I think they would tell you that what they expected to accrue as a private benefit when they invested in this business is not the return they got. It goes from purchasing and remediation and all
Yeah,
of
I
that.
found it interesting, because we were on the Superfund site 25 years ago, because we had underground storage, but we had to,
You had to take
we
care
did
of
not
that.
have much
Yes.
of this type of activity
Right.
being done for us. We had to, we worked
You
with
had to
Johnson,
do it all.
you know, Johnson Engineers,
Yeah.
we took care of it.
Sorry. Yep, I'm re-
The Montpelier Union Elementary School, another site that was enrolled in our program. It was probably like 5 years ago or so, there was a parent group that got together and identified the need to renovate the existing playground on the site. There is a kind of a one play structure, there's some older swings and one slide, and this serves as one of the few playgrounds that is within walking distance of downtown Montpelier and is basically open to not only all the kids that go to school at this school, but it serves as a kind of a town playground as it's open to the public as well. And so there was identification that they really wanted, the school group, volunteer group wanted to renovate this playground, and so they applied for some grant funding and were able to cover the cost of getting a landscape architecture firm to start developing some plans for this site. Now, this site is, for those of you who may not be familiar, it's located on Park Avenue in Montpelier, and this photo is taken from Hubbard Street, which is right off of East State Street. And so the school is kind of in, kind of backed up on this hillside, and so this photo is taken from higher up, and the school has a hill around the back of it. And so they wanted to redevelop the playground, make it a more interesting and engaging playscape for the children, provide opportunities for some kind of outdoor classrooms and so forth. And so the Regional Planning Commission invested over $66,000 in the assessment work. And the reason why it came up that there would be some assessment work needed at the site, it was one of the consultants involved with the redesign of the project had worked on some projects in Burlington and identified that you don't want any surprises when you actually start digging in the ground. So maybe you want to do some site assessments ahead of time so you don't have any surprises when you are ready for construction. And so what they found was actually the remnants of this building in the backyard of that school. This school, and this is a view if you're looking up School Street. I'm not sure if this was like the old high school, maybe. And there's a closer picture of it. This school was located in the playground of the old school, and this school burnt down. And they basically just kind of buried it. And so all of the remains of those burnt building supplies contribute a level of contamination to the site. And so they found that this was in the school's backyard. So that was kind of, I think many people in Montpelier maybe had heard about this, but this was something that, okay, the consultants, Johnson Company said, this is something that, you know, is going to need to be addressed. So they have a new design for the playground, and part of the design is going to incorporate sustainable stormwater management techniques on the site. Because that site is nestled into a hillside, they've experienced some kind of slope slumping going on, and it is the receiving site for all the stormwater that comes from the building that sits above the site and kind of off of Hubbard Street. And if you go to this site, either during wet weather or during the snow melt, you'll see a lot of running water, which, I mean, the kids love to play in. But what happens is it all pools by like one of the main entrances and creates this like ice skating rink, and then it's a big puddle, and it's just not the greatest situation to have on this site. So that was one of the aspects that's been incorporated into this design that will be a benefit to the site and to the city of Montpelier once it's reconstructed. And these are some pictures. They've actually started doing the work. There was a very elaborate kind of grid plan that was developed by the Johnson Company, who was identifying the amount of soil that would have to be removed from different sections of the site in order to ensure that it was meeting some of the state standards. And so the work involved with putting together a plan like that, implementing the plan, getting the people out there to actually physically remove the soil, you know, that's creation of jobs, and that's a benefit, that one of the benefits that comes from this program. And also, it creates a healthy environment for the next generation. This is the school teacher, Mrs. Koch. She goes out and she plants tulips with her first graders. And so, like many kids, they want to be out in the ground, and she actually runs a kind of outdoor education curriculum program. And so I think, you know, the benefit of this site going through the program and going through redevelopment not only will create an enjoyable playscape for the kids that go to school there within the next few years, but we're really looking at the long term and the benefits it'll have for the next generation. This is the last example that I'll show. This is also a site in Montpelier. This is the Granite Works building that is located off of Granite Shed Lane. For folks that aren't familiar with where this building is located, if you were to go down Stonecutters Way, go past the co-op, and if you were just to kind of keep going, that's where this building is. And there's up until recently, there were 2 active granite sheds that were located there. They've both recently been sold. Granite Works basically was purchased, the business itself was purchased by a granite business that was located in Barrie. They consolidated, they took all the inventory, they purchased the business, and they took all the equipment out of the building. So what's left is this shell of a building. The Granite Works business itself basically doesn't exist anymore. And the property owner wants to sell the building. It was a family business. Our Brownfields program has contributed over $78,000 worth of assessment work to this site. And there's a picture of kind of what the interior of this building looks like. And so this is the type of activity that would have been happening in that granite shed. This isn't a picture of that particular granite shed. This is actually a picture from a granite shed in Barrie City, but the processes were all very similar. And in the cleaning of the stones as they were engraving them and so forth, it involved a cleaning process where they were having to use mineral spirits to clean off the stone. And in the Granite Works building, that was happening probably like in many other granite sheds, where they were cleaning off the stone with this mineral spirits, which is a petroleum based substance. And the excess was basically just kind of filtering down through the earthen floor. So one of the concerns that arose through this assessment was to be able to identify the impacts of that mineral spirit on the site. And so one of there are some other environmental concerns that were identified in the Phase 2 assessment, but the biggest one was that they found that there was about 2 feet of petroleum-based product floating on top of the groundwater underneath this shed, which presents a concern to a redeveloper. They want to be able to understand the extent of that, what are some of the remediation options before they can move forward with creating like a solid redevelopment plan. And so the benefits of having this site go through our program to be able to answer a lot of those questions will really provide that prospective purchaser who the owner is currently engaged with a prospective purchaser. I don't believe they've kind of signed any contracts. But the benefits that we'll see from being able to assist this property owner in that redevelopment process will be similar to some of the other sites where the assessment work and the actual work of actually kind of cleaning the site up and redeveloping it, that will create jobs for people in our region. When this site goes through the redevelopment process, that will also help implement the Montpelier TIF District plan. Montpelier identified a TIF district which extended from their downtown along Stonecutters Way and actually went down. This is like at the most furthest point in their TIF district boundary area. So the city of Montpelier recognized this granite shed and the neighboring one as 2 key sites that could be redeveloped, and that they wanted to present some economic incentives to help with that redevelopment of these sites.
Sorry, the TIF district for...
Yeah, so it's a tax incremental financing district. So if you identify, you're familiar with kind of how that works?
Not totally, but it gives tax incentive to develop.
Yeah.
Quick study.
Yeah. And so, once this site is redeveloped into the future, that will help contribute to the local tax base, and that redeveloped commercial space will offer new space for either a new startup business in Montpelier, or it'll help provide space for a business that wants to expand. So those are all benefits that we see happening from our investment from our Brownfields program. And so not only can we provide the money to help this, but we also have kind of additional value that we offer by running this program. we help build partnerships. The photos here, this was of the school. This was the former principal of the elementary school, along with one of the volunteers that was helping kind of secure funding and work together to develop the design. And there's Bonnie working with the Johnson Company. And so when we enroll one of these sites, we work closely with the people that are interested in either selling it or redeveloping it, working closely with the consultants. We're lucky enough to have some of the consultants that we use they are located in Montpelier, so we're able to build those relationships with those other professionals that can just help strengthen the work that we do and the program. And of course we help build that relationship with the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Sites Management Division. They're the regulator, and we can help kind of work with both them and a property owner and help facilitate conversations and meetings. We also can help with funding. We can direct people to where they can find additional funding, or we can help get that additional funding for them. As we mentioned, our funding ended on September 30th, but two of our sites, the Granite Works sites and Bonacorsi, need additional assessment work. So something that I've been working on since this grant ended was to apply for additional funding to other regional planning commissions so that they could continue that assessment work. So recently Chittenden County has verbally approved the spending of their funds to help the Bonacorsi site in Barry City, and Lamoille County Planning Commission has agreed to fund additional assessment work at the Granite Works site. And so that's a benefit that the people that are enrolled in our program, we can help them get additional funding by working with our partners throughout the state. And we also provide education, not only to people who are interested in redeveloping a site, but also for people who work in professions that may come into contact with brownfield sites. In November, we helped organize and co-host a Bagels of Brownfields meeting that we held in Barry City. It was a really snowy morning, but we had a pretty decent showing of commercial lenders. We had realtors that work with property transactions. We had some other consultants who came together to hear a presentation from Vermont DEC to better understand what that process is, to go through the brownfield site assessment, what is a brownfield, and to understand some of those legal aspects to ensure that you've done your due diligence if you're looking to purchase a commercial building. So that's another piece of what we do with this funding and the assistance that we provide. And so I'll end with one more example in another historic site. Anybody know where this is?
Is that state of Maine?
Is it in Barry?
Yes, it's in Barry.
That's what it looks like.
As you had gone through the city center or heading south?
So the brick building exists today.
Yeah, that's the one I'm
And that's where Studio Place Arts is located.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So these, I don't know if it was a flood or just a really wet day, but these two buildings are no longer there. People may remember the site looking like this when the buildings were knocked down, and I believe the city of Barry had secured some federal funds that was earmarked for the revitalization of urban blight. So those buildings were demolished, and this is what was built in its place. And when CVRPC did contribute some funds towards that assessment. So these are all examples of different brownfield sites that are within our region, and some of the ones that we've helped along the way in their assessment process.
We have time for maybe one or two questions. We're running a little bit behind, but if somebody's got a question for Claire about this.
Is
Alan?
the Grossman site in Montpelier, the old Grossman's building, is that on your list of potential in places?
Yes, it is. That was a coal gasification plant. I think there's some
Coal tars.
coal tar and so forth. That's been on our list. What I understand, I think that maybe they got some money from the Vermont DEC, but I'm not sure where they are in their assessment or redevelopment planning.
Who's the current owner of that?
I think it was some out-of-state owner.
Are the brownfields identified on our town maps?
Within like your municipal plan. I've not seen towns identify them on a municipal town plan map. You can go on the Agency of Natural Resources Environmental Atlas, and they've identified them, and so they've identified sites that have been already identified as brownfields, but they also have some other layers, like if they know there was a historic laundromat, then there's a little coat hanger, and that's kind of the bell of like, because those are kind of notorious for, yeah.
And can you explain the difference between a Superfund site and a brownfield? A regular old property.
So a brownfield is we have the definition right here. So a brownfield is real property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of hazardous substance, pollutants, or contaminants. And I think that the may there is the key part. You could be looking at a site and you could either be thinking, there may be contamination there, but I don't know, so we should do some evaluation to see. The Superfund site is one that has been designated as having a certain level of contamination as identified by the federal government. I think under, what was it, CERCLA? Yeah, and that is kind of the bad of the bad. This is it might be there, we don't know, but let's find out.
And what's the difference between a brownfield and property next to me?
There may not be a difference. Some folks could go, I mean, one place you could look is you could go to a farm field, and that's a green field, and if it's been a farm field forever, then it's probably, there's nothing there. But in some places you could go into a village area, and there could be kind of a field there, and you could think, well, that's just a field, there's nothing there. But if you were to look at old historic maps or talk to some people that lived there a long time, it could be that there was a building there, some kind of processing facility that burnt down and basically just turned into a field. And so that's when the line gets a little bit blurred. If you're in a downtown area or in an urban area, probably are thinking that it's within your best interest to at least do a phase 1 site assessment so you kind of know whether there's something there or not. Unless you just know that's been a farm field and that's just, nothing's ever been there, then it's a green field and you may be in the clear.
Thank you, Claire. This program is one that certainly my town has got firsthand experience with. Under a previous grant, site was studied to take a look at an old out-of-service garage. I think it had been owned by WEC, the
Our
electric
offer wasn't
co-op.
good enough.
As a result of having the site assessed, it was cleaned up, and V-Trans built a park and ride, which is now functioning as a park and ride and a bus stop, and it's got electric chargers on it, and it's owned by the town, and it's a good deal for our little village that, you know, have this kind of facility. It took a little while for it all to get from start of studies to actually completed park and ride, but it's been a real benefit to our town.
The property owners that participate in brownfields are the world's most patient individuals. If you can pay for it yourself, you would. Because you don't have, it's not that you don't have the checks and balances of state oversight, but if you can pay for it yourself, you don't have a committee to talk to and consider whether they want or don't want to pay. You may not have the same periods of review by the EPA and the state. So we always encourage owners, if you can do this yourself, go for it. And the folks who come to this program, kind of answering some of your questions before, are usually the ones who can't. As owners, can't afford to do it, so they can bring a developer in. They've got some folks who want to do something, but the finances just don't work for them. So most people who come really do need the help. There are some savvy developers who know how to use these programs.
Oh, I'm sure.
So next up, we've got Dan, who we haven't seen for a while. It's nice to have you, Dan.
Thanks for having me back.
And you're going to talk to us about one of the transportation program things you've been working on. So please
That's
go
some
for
transportation that's changing, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that. In particular, it's a public transit change, and so this is actually the title of the project. Transportation is changing. Make it work for you. And so, really, the project is based on the need to help educate our transit users about some change and to engage directly with those users to help facilitate a change to the transit system. And so, I'm going to stop for a second. Is this a little fuzzy? Because it looks fuzzy from this side. I'm going to focus this lens for a minute.
That's pretty clear from, I thought it was just fuzzy.
That's better.
Great, sorry. But why are we looking at this, right? Bonnie, would you click one more time? We're really looking at this because changes can be challenging. And they're just not challenging for us. They're challenging for people, for older adults and people with disabilities, as well as the caregivers that help those older adults and people with disabilities. And so, what CVRPC ended up being able to do was applying for a grant. It's an inclusive planning grant, and the grant is helping us to look at how older adults and people with disabilities use transit existingly, as well as how they might use transit as it changes. The Green Mountain GMT, Green Mountain Transit, they've identified a change in our region called a paratransit system. And it would be a change to our existing bus system. Our buses currently deviate from their routes, pick up someone and come back to the route. Paratransit would be a separate vehicle that actually would make that trip, and the buses would be anchored to their routes. And so we identified a grant, an inclusive planning grant, as I mentioned, to help engage directly with those users of the existing public transit system, as well as those who might use the new paratransit system. I include this slide about the pathways to inclusion because one of the focuses of the grant is actually to help learn where you are in including people in your planning more inclusively, and then work through the process of inclusive planning to actually engage up the level. And so, theoretically, we're at level 1 or 2. Right, which is pretty low on being inclusive in our planning. And I say inclusive, that means bringing more than just the usual suspects to the meeting. Right, really engaging strongly with older adults, people with disabilities, and their caregivers, people that don't usually attend meetings like this or can't because, say, the bus doesn't run late enough, or it's not on a transit route, or there isn't a volunteer driver available at the time when the meeting's occurring. And ideally, beyond learning how to be more inclusive, the idea is also to actually plan more inclusively overall, right, is another goal of the grant. And so, as I've mentioned a few times, our target population really is focused on engaging directly with people, that older adults, people with disabilities, and caregivers. But really, we also want to focus on transit-dependent populations, those that can't afford a car, but need the transit to get to work, shopping, medical appointments. And then anyone that may help those people that then use the service. Our grant had us form a steering committee to start off with. And so the steering committee had to focus on, did I spell something wrong? No? Okay.
I like your title.
Lee, how's this working for you, Lee?
Oh, I meant to be old. It's talking old adults.
I thought maybe you did. Sorry.
That's what I get for proofreading my own work. The grant, when we first applied, we actually had to pre-identify our participants as well as our partners. And so participants are older adults, people with disabilities, and caregivers. So we had to upfront identify these people, work aggressively to recruit them to the process even before we were awarded the grant, and
So
then
is it really
bring
an
them.
older adult or an old adult?
It's really an older adult.
Come on.
Yeah. Older adult.
Okay, so
Yeah.
he's working toward it. That's important to say.
Important distinction, John.
Yeah. And then engage, and then have these people really engage in the steering committee as we develop material for our outreach, as we present it to the communities, as we developed our survey, all of which I'll talk about next. But these are the other partners, that we have at the table. We're there, that's why I'm talking tonight. But we also, we work really closely with the Council on Aging, the Vermont Center for Independent Living, Berry Project Independence, as well as Green Mountain Transit, and then Agency of Transportation. Everyone is sending someone to these meetings so that we get broad engagement.
Can I just say the old adult is because I'm with a group called Community of Vermont Elders, and I was representing the group. I'm not old.
We know this, we can tell.
You work with that, Lee.
And so how have we reached out? And so, we started by identifying the need to host some community meetings, have some focus groups, and so we were able to identify 4 groups to meet with. We went and we developed an input survey and then distributed that survey. We also went and produced a public service video. And then, we did a newspaper article. But what does this engagement really look like? It really looks like this, right? And so, we've got our survey. That was through a web tool called SurveyMonkey, which is the digital web tool. And all of you might have used it before on various surveys that the Commission has shared. But also we got some great press in the Bridge. We bought ads in all the local newspapers. I was on 2 different videos. This is a video here that I was on, as well as the one over in the corner with our good friend Dale being lifted by one of the lifts in a GMT bus. And then a couple of the meetings that we attended, one at the Montpelier Senior Center and one with the Vermont Association of the Blind. And so really this is what engagement is. This is taking the information right to the populations, right, that we want engagement from. Instead of having people come to us, we went to them. So think of it that way. And so the community meeting that we hosted came up with a number of barriers that, this was shared directly from the people at the meeting. So we have barriers and solutions. And so a lot of the barriers that people are talking about is like, I have really weather and seasonal dependent barriers, right, to using transit. It's just, in the summertime, I don't mind driving. But in the wintertime, I don't want to walk on the sidewalks to my car. So I'd like someone to come and pick me up, right? What's that scenario look like as we move into paratransit? There's visual impairments that are barriers. But at the same time, we talked about solutions, right? And so really helping to provide training, more training for the drivers. Have it be that the buses can communicate better to where the people are so that when they know a bus arrives, the person knows the bus is there and go and get the bus, right? Or the car, right? As opposed to being, just waiting inside and missing the ride, right? And so there's a number of scenarios that I've heard over time about that. And so, but really, our direct outreach has resulted in talking and engaging with over 500 people so far, right? And so, we've met in person with 95 people. We've received surveys from 246 people. This is both digital as well as hard copy. And then we've been able to record 197 media clicks. This is through views of our videos on YouTube, on Vimeo, as well as social media clicks on our Facebook page. And so all these, every time someone engages with us, likes our page, passes on the information, that's outreach and contact that we've made. And so that 246 survey results, I'm going to spend some time highlighting some of the things that we found so far. You should know, we just barely closed the survey. We compiled all the results on Monday last week. And so I've been combing through them. I haven't quite finished all the combing, but here's some information that I found so far. So ideally, we were, the steering committee had a goal to reach at 100 people that, within inside the survey, that said that I'm an older adult or a person with a disability. And so we've easily reached that goal. With 246 surveys, just about half of them recorded as being an older adult, and 42% of them recorded as being a person with a disability. And so for us, that was a great win. We're like, yes, we're already off to a great start with our survey results.
They didn't overlap.
Well, they do. They're multiple choice questions, so which is okay, just as long as we understand, you know. But overall, we were hoping for 100 people to say yes to those two questions, and we achieved that. And so inside the survey, we asked the respondents, what town are you, do you live in? And so this helps us to keep track of like where the surveys are coming from to make sure that we are asking the people that are living in the communities that the service will be provided in. And right now the service is really focused on the Montpelier area. And so those large pink dots are 70 surveys apiece have been received from the Montpelier area, and then another 15 recorded from Barre Town. And so that's just about half of the surveys have come from that target area within inside the service territory that is talking about having this change. So again, that's a great result. Overall, the map, this is 22 towns that we've received at least one survey from. Those are the black dots, 18 of which are in our county, our regional territory. Within inside the survey, we asked a number of questions about, okay, so paratransit is a service provided, for people with disabilities and older adults. Do you think you would qualify for this service? So without actually having a service in place, the people that responded, 54% of them responded, yes, I think I would qualify already for this paratransit service. And then there was another 45 that said either no or unsure. So that's, something to tease apart as we move forward. Another thing that we wanted to discover is whether the existing services, which is through the deviated service that the buses run, or our volunteer drivers, which Green Mountain Transit provides, whether those services are already meeting the existing needs or not. And so primarily 50% of the people said that yes, the service that they're getting through Green Mountain Transit, whether it's on the bus or the deviation or a volunteer driver, is meeting their needs, and we're getting to the destinations where I want to go. There's 17% that said no, so that's again another data point that we'll have to take apart a little bit and find out what are the reasons. And then I just want to note this 34% that says not applicable. Those are 34% of the respondents aren't using GMT's bus at all to get to a destination. And again, that's another point to take apart because we really want to understand how many people still drive and what age they are when they're driving. And so, because we know older adults are still holding on to their cars and using them, and so it's a target population that as they age, they start to become unable to drive. And so when does that happen? And how is transit going to be prepared for that shift? We also wanted to know how well GMT is doing at meeting the needs, not just getting to a destination, but overall, when you make an appointment with GMT, how are they doing? And so really, overall, they're doing very well, right? It's not that 98% rate that you get from Geico, but, they're doing an okay job. I will note something I thought it was compelling. If you remember from the previous slide, 17% of the people said, no, I can't get to where I'm going. And 17% said that GMT's not doing very well. Correlation? Maybe? I'll find out. And so, the other thing that we want to understand is like when paratransit, if it becomes something that's implemented, we want to know where people want to go, right? And so we ask them questions around what are the destinations that you want to go if you use the bus, or if you don't use the bus, where would you want to go if you had to use the bus? And so really most of the people are looking at getting to medical appointments. They're looking to go shopping. But there's been a lot of discussion on our committee meetings about doing things with friends and family as well as leisure activity as one of the many, one of the benefits that people have in getting out of the house, not being alone all the time. And so, about 40% of people, 40% of the respondents, said that they would want that to happen. And so it's something to incorporate as we develop the system. And so because word clouds are the thing of the future, why not for this as well? And so we had a number of open-ended questions. This one in particular is around a question based on if there was anything GMT could do to improve the service for you, what would it be? And so these are weighted by the number of words inside the responses from all the responses. And so you can see right off the top, there's a lot of people, that feel like, that the bus needs some improvement. There are some positives on here too, but a lot of the things, you can see service comes up a couple of times, the drivers, these aren't all negatives. There are some positives in a number of the comments, but we're going to take some time and take, look through this as well, but I thought this was fun. And then we wanted to understand, make sure that the population that we received our surveys back from, that we saw both young and older adults inside of the surveys. And so primarily, we did see older adults, those 55 years or older. But there were a number of younger adults as well that came and responded to our survey. And anecdotally, Agency of Transportation said that this population here, 75 and older, that's the population that they really need to hear from as they do their planning to understand how long that population is keeping their cars around for, so that they can plan for transit for them. Yeah. So that was all the charts. Are there any questions before I go past the statistics? There was actually a total of 20 questions, so those were just a few of them. And so we're going to play around with the results and have a good time. So the grant had a secondary, but besides planning inclusively, they also wanted us to be sustainable. Right, after the grant is done, this was only a 6-month grant, so we're done this work on January 15th of 2019. That's when my funding is finished up. But they wanted us to be sustainable beyond that point, and so we had to work with inside of our group to identify some goals to be sustainable. And so we're going to continue working together as a group is what we identified, both formally and informally, and really work with older adults and people with disabilities to be an advocate for change. We're going to talk with the participants about how to stay engaged and then hopefully provide information back to them in those ways. And then there's Green Mountain Transit has an ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act Advisory Board. Right now that board is only for Chittenden County. If Washington County does have an implemented paratransit service, that service would also join the ADA Advisory Committee Board, so members from our committee could join that board as well. And so identifying some people, so we had a rural member would be key. And so these are some of our next steps. As I said, we're just about a month away from having the grant be done. And so we're holding 2 more public meetings. These are going to be one in Montpelier and one in Barre. Barre is on the 17th. It's actually going to be at the Barre Manor, which is the large brick high-rise inside of the downtown. And then the second one on the 18th in Montpelier at the Vermont Center for Independent Living in their office. And the goal is to highlight a lot of the similar results from the survey, but also to thank people and call them to action to stay engaged in the process. Green Mountain Transit has talked about working towards the end of the summer in 2019 for the implementation of paratransit. If that truly happens, staying engaged throughout the process is going to be key, because Green Mountain Transit still has its set of public meetings, its engagement, its route planning, its time point survey. There's a lot of stuff that still has to go through before this is actually up and running. And then we're going to develop a second video, a companion video to our first one. again, highlighting the survey results. The videography is going to be done by Rick behind us. And then ultimately, we're going to develop an outline and then share that outline to Green Mountain Transit and provide them the input that we discovered through our surveys. Yeah. And any questions about our Transportation is Changing, Make It Work for You project?
Dan, why is CVRPC leading this planning effort and not Green Mountain Transit?
Sure.
I'll ask the others.
Well, yeah. So, we really we saw a need right off the bat. So Green Mountain Transit was coming to ourselves and our local partners and saying, we're going to implement paratransit and it's going to be great. And everyone's like, really? Well, let's look at that. And so it was an opportunity really for CVRPC to identify and work through a process with Green Mountain Transit that wasn't leading the charge, but saying, hey, let's wait, let's look at this, right? Is paratransit the right thing for our county? Should we think about a different, outline beyond what you're already doing in Chittenden County, And so how best should we implement this? And let's engage really strongly with the stakeholders that would utilize it so that it's for them, not necessarily based on what the models say or what ADA, the minimums requirements are. So make it more about the users. And so it gave us an opportunity.
Just one thing I'd like to say about it. I think it's been interesting what's going on so far, but this study is sort of constrained because the users of the buses now on the deviated routes are limited to 3/4 of a mile from a non-commuter route. So it's a very, very small portion geographically. If you look at our region, what is covered underneath this is a small portion of it. And this study here is not looking at any expansion of the existing service, which I think there really is a need for, and we should be looking at that as part of another study that would really be identifying areas where we should be moving public transit in, not just how we better utilize our existing public transit. And that's what this study's really doing.
I was wondering if it would be possible for you to send an email to commissioners, basically, so they can push the December 17th or 18th meeting on social media in their town, or just make people aware.
Yeah, we've been doing it through our steering committee and public, partners, but I'm happy to do it as well.
Yeah, if you did, and then, and also if you do a link to the video.
Did your study identify or talk about funding sources to implement this project?
So, Green Mountain Transit is we believe Green Mountain Transit is already implementing the recommendations for the paratransit, as they call it, paratransit service. What it looks like, what the qualification process is, because there will be one now, what the service territory is. The 3/4 of a mile is the minimum for ADA.
Yeah.
And so there are opportunities here to discuss with them. Maybe it should be a little larger, right? Maybe a mile makes more sense because of the number of more people that it encompasses, what routes will be impacted. And so there's still some discussion about the actual on-the-ground implementation. But Green Mountain Transit is in it to be the implementer of the paratransit service. And so hopefully, and I believe we are now, far enough in advance of that implementation to actually provide some input.
So there's existing funding that.
Yeah, and so and so Lee, kind of to your point, there was a study called Next Gen that kind of looked at a little bit of what you're talking about. Where would we want new routes? That study also looked at, do we have the density in our county to actually operate a paratransit service? And the answer was yes. And then is it cost effective? Because what would end up happening is that the buses would then anchor themselves to the routes, theoretically becoming more on time, more dependable for commuters. And then older adults and people with disabilities could then utilize a paratransit service, and it would almost, I like to use the term door to destination. That's not quite the right term for transit, But really, it's someone would get picked up almost at their door. It's more like curb, brought to their destination, dropped off. They would go to their appointment, whether it's medical or shopping or maybe even leisure, and then be taken back home, theoretically making their trip much shorter. And so not having to ride the bus on that deviation, which could take up to an hour actually, that you would end up being on the bus, where the trip in reality is about 15 minutes by car. So paratransit could offer that speedier service. There will be some people left behind though. Right now the deviation can be requested by anyone. There's no qualifications. So anyone without even a disability could ask for a deviation as long as they called in advance. Those people that may not qualify for paratransit but utilize the bus because they have limited mobility may end up struggling a little bit more finding transit. And so there is a population that will be negatively impacted. That unfortunately was not a population that we focused on, so we're still not sure how we're going to be able to target that. And when we reached out to Green Mountain Transit to try to figure out who those people are asking for a deviation, and the answer was, well, we don't, there's not a list, it's not a qualification, that's not something they're tracking. They're just tracking this trip has to be picked up at this time, this bus does it, implement. So there's still some outreach to be done. And you should know a lot of our survey results are leading us to believe that education on just not the new service but the existing service may be the key to improving bus not only use but also reliability, education by the drivers, education by the users could actually improve. And so a lot of people would say in their surveys, it's great, but I know there's a bus there, but I don't know the name of it. So, bringing some education might be the next steps as well.
The next gen plan was a comprehensive system analysis, in part to look at the existing system and how we can make it more effective. So in answer to your question, Steve, the first things that GMT is implementing from that study are the things that are cost neutral or actually reduce costs. And the paratransit service was supposed to be cost neutral. They've got a few more numbers to run, conceptual versus reality. But those are the ones they're moving forward with as quickly as possible.
And I'll just say one final point about the surveys. We've actually received, we sent out a large mailing, 700 people got a direct mailing, so a hard copy survey. Currently to date, we've received about 21% of those surveys back, which for an external survey has been great. A lot of the websites I've been reading claim about 10 to 15% return rate for external surveys. So the fact that we're in the 20s for our survey responses is a great result of this as well. So it really seems like we've been able to not only engage directly with the people that we hope to engage with, but it's in the right geographic territory. And so yes, now we'll just come up with an outline. So easy, right? Let's do it tomorrow. So great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Reading a code of conduct and a conflict of interest policy for commissioners. This was on the agenda last month, but you didn't have a quorum, so it's back on the agenda this month to take a look at. It's on page 2 of your packet. There is a memo explaining what has changed since the last time you saw it. The last time we had in September we had quite a bit of extensive discussion, and commissioners asked staff to go do a little bit of homework and do a little tweaking in response to some of that homework and the questions that had been raised. The memo summarizes what the questions were that had been asked, and essentially there were 3 of them, noting about influencing could be positive or negative. Some research about could a commissioner be removed from the commission and by whom? And a third question was about somebody who has a real or perceived conflict of interest. Do you or can they engage in discussion or not? So staff did the research. The summary, really quick, the summary of the questions is in the memo on page 2. Only a municipality, under our current, under our bylaws, only a municipality can remove a commissioner, so that takes care of that one question. Second one was, research was, does the commissioner have to abstain from participating in discussions? And after looking at a variety of state kind of sources of how this works in a organization such as ours, the answer ultimately came out is you could participate in the discussion, just can't vote, or shouldn't vote. So a few modifications have been made in the text. The new conflict of interest policy that's proposed is on page 4 in your packet. The areas that have got the yellow highlighting is where those changes have been made based on that and on the research that's been done. Executive committee reviewed these changes and felt that they were appropriate and wanted to bring it back to the commission. And at this point, what we'd like to do is answer any questions, have any further discussion, and see if we are ready to adopt this as our new code of conduct and conflict of interest policy. Yes, Brown, yes.
Yes, on page 5, I'd like to recommend a change in the wording. Maybe I'm being really cautious. The present reading is...
What line are you on, Bram?
Page 5, line number, starting at the end of line 4. It reads 4 through 6. Presently it reads, "The Board of Commissioners has determined that commissioners participating in discussions or decisions regarding the municipalities they represent does not constitute a conflict of interest because the commissioner's role functions in the public interest rather than a personal interest." And my suggestion would be to take out participating in discussions or decisions regarding the municipalities they represent and simply say, "The Board of Commissioners has determined that commissioners advocating for the interests of their towns does not constitute a conflict of interest because the commissioner's role functions in the public interest rather than the personal interest." And it might be a subtle distinction, but the way it reads now, it's almost as if the commissioners determined that participating in discussions or decisions regarding the municipalities they represent does not constitute a conflict of interest.
Right.
And I think that in a legal sense, I think it's a little gray, because wouldn't the defense simply be, well, you've said the commissioners have determined the commissions, I'm participating in the discussion, what's the problem? Rather than focusing on advocating for the interests of the town. That's all. Maybe this is too, subtle, or doesn't, I'm getting the sense I'm not being clear. In other words, the way it reads the first way, it's as if you're saying participating in discussions or decisions regarding the municipalities they represent, versus clearly stating when you're advocating for the town as a commissioner, it's not a problem, but simply participating in the discussion is not.
Yeah. No, I think you've offered us something that is more succinct and more precise in what it's trying to say.
These kinds of documents are going to be brought up in the context of lawyers and something, and I could see somebody saying, well, clearly you state participating in the discussion, that's sanctioned, therefore there isn't a problem. Whereas if you specifically say, the commissioners advocate for the interests of the town, that's a little clearer. But once again, maybe I'm being...
Kirby?
I think what's written right here is broader than what you're saying.
Yes.
And advocating would fall into this. So I'm not seeing where the problem would be.
Well, this is an example. Let's say you have somebody who's doing something nefarious, and it's sort of I could see an argument being made by their advocate saying, you say that commissioners participating in the discussions or decision regarding municipalities represent does not constitute a conflict. That's what it says. It doesn't say, in other words, you have to be advocating for the town rather than individual personal. It's something that, what I'm saying is that it's the kind of thing that might undo, that a lawyer for somebody who's doing something bad could use this language as a defense, that's all. But once again, maybe I'm being too precise.
Yeah, I think the rest of that sentence pretty well clarifies that, being in the public interest rather than a personal interest. So I think the implication, maybe implied is not what you're looking for, but the implication is certainly that, you are more than welcome to participate in the discussion or decision regarding, and advocate, if you will, for your community, as long as it's in the public interest rather than a personal interest. And so I don't see a problem. I personally don't have a problem with the present wording. I see what you're saying, but I don't think we need to refine it that necessarily that much, but possibly so.
Byron?
Bram, I understand what you're getting at, but I do think that, in line 2, when it starts talking about, basically, it sets the stage for that, the concluding sentence of that paragraph, in terms of what is a commissioner supposed to be doing. Well, it's a quasi-political position appointed by select board. So basically, when that legal obligation to the commission, once, let's say somebody, you use the word nefarious, but what I'm getting at is that one of the wonderful things about living in our little Vermont towns is that the select board has the ability to watch that commissioner and how that commissioner acts. I mean, we're on tape here. And what I'm getting at is that that's what's up to the select board. The select board says, hey, geez, Byron, you weren't acting in the town's interest. You were trying to get a job to build that building. Hey, guess what, Byron? You're not the commissioner anymore. That's how it works. And I think it works fairly well. And I think that basically the concerns you have within that last sentence are really addressed by the 2 sentences or 3 sentences before that, and sets the stage for how someone's properly supposed to conduct themselves as a commissioner.
Right. I have less faith in the select board overseeing commissioners than you do, but once again, we agree to disagree.
You have a wonderful select board, very talented.
No, I'm not saying your town. I'm just saying I've seen instances in certain other, is not specific to this, but what I mean is that these documents only come into action, so to speak, when there's a problem, and I'm just concerned about loose language, and maybe it's not, and maybe I think you both have said maybe I'm being ridiculous. So.
No, not ridiculous.
No, not at all.
Any other thoughts about either Bram's point or other aspects of the policy? Yes, John.
I think there's the misuse of a word is a wrong word being used. On page 3 of the actual document, line 36, says the staff must appraise the commission. I think the word is apprise. Appraise is when you put value on something. I know it's used commonly or misused commonly. I think the word is apprise the commission.
Right. We'll blame it on autocorrect in the word processing. Anything else? Is someone interested in moving to approve the proposed code of conduct and conflict of interest policy, either as presented or with some other changes to it?
I'll make the motion to approve the proposed conflict of interest.
I'll second.
So the motion is by Bob, seconded by, that was Bram?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion?
With or without John's comment.
As written.
Oh.
At least with the.
So I'm going to go back to Bob, is yes?
With the grammatical correction.
Okay, with the grammatical correction. That's okay
I didn't
with,
realize there was a motion on the table, I was at the men's room now. Sorry about that.
any further discussion? So the motion is to approve the Code of Conduct and Conflict of Interest policy with the typographical correction that John brought up. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much. We have 3 previous meeting minutes. July 6th, we didn't get around to doing because we didn't meet in August, and it sort of fell off the agenda on September. October, and the meeting summary, not formal minutes because we didn't have a quorum, but nevertheless, there is a summary from the November, our November gathering. Any comments on any of these minutes or meeting summary? And if not, would somebody move to approve them?
I move we approve the minutes of the 3 previous meetings and group discussions.
Okay, the motion is by Peter. Do we have a second?
A second.
Seconded by Bob. Any discussion? All in favor of approving these meeting minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, next up we have reports. Start on page 19 of your packet. We have the staff report. Is there any additions, corrections, staff, Bonnie?
2 things from me before everybody else takes their turn. We've been invited by the Central Vermont Public Safety Authority to come talk to them this month about the Regional Planning Commission and the services we provide. Some of you, last month was Paco Allen talking about that authority. The Barre and Montpelier cities councils did not give the nod for the proposal on the table to go forward. That pretty much ended Paco's work with the group because he's done what he can. But his comment was that the group itself still exists and may need some staff support to organize meetings and move forward. And his experience with the local emergency planning commission, who we provide administrative support for, was that that may be the same kind of support that organization needs. So he's asked if we'll go talk to their board this month and just let them know what, if anything, we might be able to assist with. It would be a fee-for-service kind of, similar to the LEPC, a fee-for-service arrangement. And then the other one is, I've been telling you these things through staff reports and the committee reports. We are the representative to Green Mountain Transit and their board. Transit funding is not sustainable. How it's arranged simply isn't sustainable. There's quite a bit of state and federal funding which has to be met with a local match. And it's fairly easy to get route startup money, but to keep that route going is proving more and more difficult. And to give you, since 2014, transit funding has increased by 1.4%. Transit expenses have increased by 10.3%. And that's doing everything the organization can to actually tighten up those expenses. So we're reaching the point where at this month's meeting next week, we're going to need to discuss alternatives. If we've done what we can through existing expenses, we're having a conversation about potential route suspensions. So I'm giving everyone the heads up that that is a conversation out there and that CVRPC will be a part of it and may potentially have to vote for those suspensions. So I don't want the board to be surprised when they come. Green Mountain Transit will also, well, not just Green Mountain Transit, the transit organizations in Vermont. This is a problem statewide based on how transit is currently funded. Will be approaching the legislature this session to start talking about transit funding and why the existing system doesn't work and where the gaps are. It's essentially, if you're willing to pay or can afford to pay, transit can come to your community. But if your community is not willing to pay, it doesn't matter how many riders you are, because you need that 20% match. So federal budgets get tight, state budgets get tight, organizations who depend on that state and federal monies and local monies, their budgets get tight as well.
Is there currently a list of the proposed cuts?
There is not a public list yet. It's because it involves contracts with drivers, and it's a contractual issue. There's not a published list of those routes. What I would suggest, there are ridership reports that tell you where ridership is low. That's a good place to start looking, if you're interested in what that might be. It doesn't mean they're all coming, please keep that in mind. This is the board saying we've got to put some order to this so that when we reach the point of having route suspensions, that we know where to begin.
But it sounds like there is a list, but it's just not public and so forth. But the challenge would be, in terms of organizing advocacy or raising money, if it comes too quick, it ain't gonna happen. So I'm wondering if there's some way of giving a heads up if there are certain communities that are in danger.
You would want to look at the ridership reports and whether they're meeting state metrics. So
okay.
Can I tell you? I cannot tell you, because it is an
But
executive session issue.
The thing that concerns me is you were saying it has to do with community supporting and not just the ridership, so just.
Yes. But understand that of this 100% cost for a route, the community is funding somewhere between 0 and 10% of it. So if you doubled your contribution, Green Mountain Transit would be ecstatic, but it wouldn't keep these routes operational at this point. The larger issue is how transit is funded in the state. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And the first move is for the board to have the conversation, and then the conversations will happen with communities. The reason we're having it this month is GMT is about to send out its request for funding to communities. And they want the board to give some direction beforehand, before they do that, so they can then have those conversations with communities about what is it, what would it take, along those lines. Does that make sense?
Well, we're still talking about staff reports. I wanted to ask Dan or Claire if you had anything that you wanted to add. And Nancy?
I have one other thing to add. There's a Public Transit Advisory Council, and so it's a member-appointed committee. The regional planning commissions have a seat at that council, and so I've been appointed, or will be appointed, as that new rep, as the rep before ended up leaving the commission that she was part of. So I'll bring updates to Bonnie, and she can share those with both the regional commissions as well as to the commission here. So.
Additionally, in your packet, there is a report on what the various committees have been doing lately. And that's on page 24. If you've got any questions on any of that, now might be a good time to ask about it, but of course you can always come back and either talk to somebody on the committee or talk to staff to find out what's going on. Any questions on either the staff report or the committee report? Okay. Did I miss? Yes, Bob.
With the silence, I'd make a motion to adjourn.
May I just do one thing first before we do that, and just...
You paused too long.
Bonnie did pass out these questionnaires. If you were here last month and heard the presentation on the web maps, if you would please fill it out and just leave it here on the table before you leave, it would be much appreciated. Bob has made a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? seconded by Don LaHaye. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you so much. We'll see you in January.
We have